So again, I don't think Jeremiah takes a lot of delight in having to re-inscribe again and again what the people of Judah are doing, like that their brother had done in Israel in the 10 northern tribes. Look at verse 1 of chapter 17. The sin of Judah is written with a pen of iron and with the point of a diamond. It is graven upon the table of their hearts and upon the horns of your altars. While till children remember their altars and their groves by the green trees upon the high hills. He's basically saying, you guys have sinned against God so often, it's like you've almost made it permanent. Now, even though Jeremiah uses very strong language about the near permanency of what the people's actions had done, we need to remember that God still is calling to them, wanting them back in this relationship and saying, I can wipe that all out. But the imagery is meant to get people's attention. If you think about Jesus, sometimes he spoke with exaggeration. For example, for effect, he talked about, look, if you have a telephone pole sticking out of your eye, you shouldn't try to pull a sliver out of somebody else's. Now, have you ever seen anybody with a telephone pole sticking out of their eye? It's just, I mean, if that was the case, that person would be dead. So sometimes we use exaggeration or hyperbole to make a point unmistakable. And this is what Jeremiah is doing. He needs people to wake up to the reality of their situation and be willing to repent and to turn back to God, who is always willing to have us back into his embrace.
You know, historically, this imagery, he might be working with something that would have been familiar to them. You've engraven, look at the end of verse 1, you've engraven upon the horns of your altars. There is an archaeological discovery in Tel Beersheba where when they uncovered the altar and they put it back together, there's a snake engraven on the altar. And you think, what is going on here? It's hard to know what's going on. Why is a snake engraven? This image, and we know that they were a little bit obsessed with the image of the snake. They call it Nehushtan, and then it has to be destroyed, right? Anyway, sort of fascinating that he then may be working with some ancient things and then talking about, you've done this on the tables of your heart. And then I love later on the imagery of God's going to inscribe on the fleshy table of the heart by the power of the Spirit. I mean, there's just all kinds of imagery that is really beautifully done here by the prophets, which isn't a surprise, right?
To expand on what you're saying, what Shon is referring to is back in the time of Moses, the people were bitten by snakes, and God said, put up a brazen serpent on a staff, and if people look to it, they'll be healed. Well, that became this religious and spiritual iconography, maybe not the right word, that was put into the tabernacle and the temple. Hundreds of years later, during the time of Hezekiah, that brazen serpent became a stumbling block for people. People missed the point. They thought that, well, if I just simply look at that, well, then I'm going to be healed. And they missed it was about Jesus. And so God asked Hezekiah to destroy this religious symbol because it was now getting in the way of people's worship. So you might imagine these ancient Israelites, let's inscribe on this altar the snake because that symbolizes how God heals us. And the question is for us, do I ever let the signs and symbols of my religion, my love for God, actually become a wall for me getting access to God? Or maybe a wall to somebody else, that because I am doing things and I'm throwing symbols out without full intention or full meaning, that I'm distracting people from the living God and distracting them with just physical objects that on their own won't save anybody. That's how we might tie that in.
Yeah, good. I like that. Thank you.
So now we have in Jeremiah chapter 18, this story about the potter's clay. We've talked about these symbols in the past of how God makes us, that he fashions us. Let's look at some of these verses here. The word which came to Jeremiah from the Lord saying, arise and go down to the potter's house, and there I will cause thee to hear my words. Then I went down to the potter's house, and behold, he wrought a work on the wheels. And the vessel which he made of clay was marred in the hand of the potter. So he made it again, another vessel, as seemed good to the potter to make it. Then the word of the Lord came to me saying, and we'll just pause here, God takes a very common experience in Jeremiah's day to teach a lesson. God can teach us with everyday lessons. You might think General Conference, they often don't talk about potter's wheels, but they talk about other things that are common in our day because they're trying to convey a lesson. It says in verse 6, O house of Israel, cannot I do with you As this potter, saith the Lord, behold, as the clay is in the potter's hand, so are ye in my hand, O house of Israel. What hope? Okay, the pot maybe didn't form properly the first time. God can work with the pot if we allow him to. So all is not lost. We don't need to think that if we've committed sin, we're on the wrong path, that we have a past that's unspeakable, that says anything about our future. We have a full future with God. When you choose to turn to God, he is the potter. He can remake all that clay and make something incredible of you. No matter what that clay happened to be in the past, it can be completely and fully remade. You do not need to let your past dictate your future. You can let God chart your future for you.
Yeah, instead of a lump of dirt, which is what we are outside of God, yeah, right? Or made from the dust of the earth, but then he makes something that holds water, that has artistry, that's beautiful, that's refined, that's elegant. That's what he's doing with us. Or, you can stay the lump of dirt, right? This is what we are, not in God's hands, right? There's some great imagery here.
And sometimes we treat one another as dirt, or we treat ourselves as dirt, and we're missing the point. God is intending to mold us. So we need not define us for where we're at today, but let ourselves be defined by who we can become with God.